Hey, this is Zach with the City on a Hill podcast. I'm the youth director at Grace Baptist Church in Coatesville, Indiana, where this message was recorded live during one of our youth services. I hope you will find this to be a blessing. I hope it uplifts you, and I hope it'll help you to grow closer to our Savior. Enjoy the message.
Genesis 42. Let me give you a little bit of background for tonight. We're going to finish Joseph tonight, but we have a ton to go through. So, I just need to keep up. A little bit of background. So Joseph, we learned about, we started Joseph when we were doing our Zoom conferences. I think this is week 5. So we've been on him for a lot, but there's a lot to learn on Joseph. So I started off learning about Joseph where he is loved by his father the most out of all of his other 11 brothers. And Joseph, because of this, Joseph's brothers get really angry at him. They throw him into a pit. They sell him into slavery. He is brought to Egypt where he is sold. Isaac, you read through this whole story in Tennessee, didn't you? Yeah, or most of it? Yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight. He had 2 dreams and told his brothers that they were going to have to bow down to him. Hannah, what would you do if Rachel came up to you and said she had a dream that you had to bow down to her? You'd probably throw her in a pit and sell her into slavery, right? But that's what Joseph's brothers do. They sell him into slavery. It's a biblical example, you know. And they take him, they sell him into slavery. He goes to Egypt. While he's in Egypt, he goes to a guy named Potiphar's house, and then grows up in Potiphar's house, becomes the second in command. He is wrongly accused, put into prison, and he has been in prison for about 3 years. We left off last week where he gets out of prison because the Pharaoh of Egypt, he has these dreams that he can't comprehend. And he calls out Joseph. Joseph has been known to interpret dreams. And he calls him out, and Joseph comes and interprets the Pharaoh's dreams to mean that there is going to be a famine coming, which basically means there's no food. And so what's going to happen here, or what does happen, is that the Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge of handling this new famine that's going to come. They're going to have 7 years of good, 7 years of plenty, and then they're going to have 7 years of famine after that. And so he puts Joseph in charge to take care of this problem. So Joseph does exactly what he should. He is put in charge. He is second in command of all of Egypt. And then he immediately begins saving up food. All this food is grown. You have 7 years of really, really good, plentiful harvest. He takes all that, puts it away, saves it. And then this is where we pick up tonight at the middle of this. So the first 7 years have just ended, and Joseph is just now beginning into the famine. He's about 2 years into the famine, and this happens. This is like my favorite part of the story, Joseph. Isaac, did you get to the end of the story, Joseph? Do you remember? Did you read like all the way through it? Okay. I was curious if you got to or not, but it's a really, really good part. Like, I love the ending of Joseph, probably one of the best endings. So at the end of Joseph, one of the best endings of any story in the Bible, I think it's really, really good. So look at Genesis 42, verse number 1. We're going to read through verse number 9. It says this. Now when Jacob, do you guys remember who Jacob is? Who is Jacob? Who's Jacob? His father. Very good. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. He's saying, we're in the middle of a famine. There's no food here. There's food in Egypt. He tells all his sons, go get some food. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. He says, you guys all go. Don't send Benjamin. He's the youngest. I don't want him to get hurt. This hasn't been a real long time since he lost Joseph. He doesn't want to lose Benjamin as well. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Let's stop there for a second. Turn back in your Bibles to Genesis 37. All right, Genesis 37, verse number 5. This is where it gets good. This is where it gets real good. All right, Genesis 37, verse number 5. Says this. You can also look up at the screen. Let's see if this brings back any flashbacks, okay? So we just read how Joseph is in charge in Egypt. He is the one that is selling the food. His brothers come up to buy food, and then they bow down to him because he is a man in power, okay? let's go back a few chapters, see what happens. See if you guys remember this. Genesis 37, 5 through 8. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaf stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. He says, he's talking about corn. Theirs basically bowed down to his in this dream. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. We just read here in Genesis 42 the exact fulfillment of this prophecy. Okay, God gives Joseph this dream all the way back when he was a 17-year-old kid. Joseph is 30 years old at this time. So 15 years has passed. And God gives him this dream that his brothers will bow down to him. I want you guys to understand something here. Think about how crazy it was for Joseph at the time he got this dream to believe that that would happen. At the time, Joseph was 17. His brothers were much older than he was. He was the lowest in the family. His brothers hated him. And God gives him a dream that his brothers will bow down to him. Think about how crazy that was. And we just read in Genesis 42 how they literally did that very same thing. Here's the lesson there. Just because you don't think God can do something in your life doesn't mean that he can't do it, okay? God promises, or he shows through a prophecy in this dream that Joseph had, that this was what was going to happen. And it seemed crazy at the time, but it still happened. When God promises you something, it's going to happen, no matter how crazy it seems, no matter how long it takes. I'm sure Joseph was thinking those 15 years as he's sitting in prison, as he's in Potiphar's house. He's saying, hey, God, when's this dream going to take place? When's my brothers going to bow down to me? Because I'm in prison. I'm in Potiphar's house. I'm a servant. When's that going to happen? And eventually it came to happen. We have to, as the Bible says, wait upon the Lord. We have to wait for those things to come to happen. So what we see happen here, I'm going to paraphrase kind of the rest of this part of the story here. Joseph's brothers come up. They ask for food. And Joseph, I want you to think about this, guys. Think about Joseph's mindset here. The last time he had seen these brothers, they threw him in a pit. And they sold him to slavery. And they told his dad that he died. Okay, this is the relationship they had the last time he seen him. Now, they are coming and bowing down to him. And Joseph can do literally anything he wants to them. Anything. He's the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. So here's what Joseph does. Here's his reaction. You may think there's all kinds of things Joseph could do. He could be nice. He could forgive them. He could kill them all. He could do all these things. Let's see what Joseph does. The first thing he does is he accuses them of being spies. All right, now Joseph has a plan here. We're going to talk about why he does all this towards the end. But the very first thing Joseph does when they ask for food, he accuses them of being spies that have come to, in a way, overthrow Egypt. And you may think at the beginning, you think, well, this is kind of an odd story, and it kind of drags on a little bit. But I think there's a really good lesson here at the end for why he does this. Joseph accuses them of being spies, and then he puts them in prison for 3 days. Okay, and there's a lot of the verses here talking about the brothers talking back and forth, and Joseph and how he does this, but they're put into prison for 3 days. At this point in time, the brothers think that this is just some Egyptian guy that for some reason thinks they're spies, and he's going to kill them for it. And they're in prison. And they're just sitting there. They don't really know what's going on. They don't know that it's Joseph. They don't know any of this. And Joseph is just playing along with this idea that he doesn't know who they are and they don't know who he is. So during those days, this is where we kind of get an emotional side of this story. During those days while they're in prison, Joseph comes by and they are talking in their normal language, the language that Joseph would have spoke. But they don't know he's Joseph. Joseph is speaking through an interpreter. They think he's Egyptian. So Joseph goes by them one day, and Joseph hears his brothers talking about this idea that the punishment they are receiving is because of what they did to Joseph. They're sitting there in prison, and they're telling each other, they're like, man, we're in prison, we're going to die because of what we did to Joseph. That's a very important thing for you guys to notice. We'll talk about that later, why that's important for you. But the Bible says that this just absolutely distraughts Joseph. And that's important for you to know later. We're going to talk about that, why all this matters. But Joseph is distraught over this, that his brothers, they still remember. I can imagine thinking, if I was him, thinking, well, maybe they just forgot about it. Maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. They just did it, forgot about it. They're just terrible people. But they had 15 years later, it was still in their minds, and they thought that is why they were there, was because of this. So Joseph takes some steps after this. This is what he does. After this 3 days, he takes one of his brothers named Simeon. He takes him, he puts him into prison. He tells the other brothers, he says, I want you to go back and get your other brother, Benjamin. He is questioning them at some point in here, and he figures out that they have another brother. And he tells them, I want you to go back, I want you to get Benjamin, and I want you to bring him to Egypt. Okay, I can imagine the brothers are starting to get a little confused. They're like, why does this guy want to see our other brother? What's going on here? And so what Joseph does, he gives them their food, the rest of the brothers, he gives them their food, and then what he does is he takes the money they paid for the food, and he hides it in their bags. All right, he wasn't going to let them suffer. He wasn't going to let them pay for the food. He puts it in there, and he sends them off back home. And he tells them before they leave, he says, if you don't come back, or if you come back without Benjamin, then I will kill you. And he says that your brother Simeon is going to stay here until you bring your brother Benjamin back. That puts them in a tough spot. Because remember at the beginning, when they went the first time, their dad wasn't too crazy about letting Benjamin go. And now they know they have to come back, they have to get Benjamin and bring him. So they come back home and they tell Jacob, they go in front of Jacob, they open up their bags. First thing they see is all their money, and they are scared to death. They think, what in the world? We have stolen from this guy that just imprisoned us. The money that Joseph put back in there, they see it, and they are thinking somehow it got mixed up and they have stolen the money. And then they tell their father Jacob, they say, what we need to do to get Simeon back is we got to bring Benjamin. And you would think, I would think that the logical answer here would be, you know what, that's not the best idea, but send him, you know. What Jacob does is he goes, no way, Simeon can sit there, Benjamin's staying right here, and they wait until they completely run out of all their food before they go back. I can imagine Simeon sitting in jail day after day, like, what in the world? Like, they were supposed to be back already, and we had no idea how much food they got. But he cared so much about Benjamin that he would not let them take Benjamin back to free Simeon. Jacob had a lot of problems in his life. Being a father was definitely one of them. He blatantly loved Joseph more than all of his other brothers. And he let one of his brothers rot in prison because he didn't want to send his other son to go and to fall into trouble there. But anyways, so this is what happens. And they're at home, they're eating the rest of the food. And finally, when they run out of food, Jacob says, all right, we got to figure out something. We're going to run out of food here. And so what happens is Jacob finally gives in to letting them bring Benjamin back to Egypt. And so they load up everything. They take the money. Jacob tells them to take double the money that they were sent back with just so he wouldn't think that they stole from him. They take all sorts of gifts, all these things to please this Egyptian person that is actually Joseph, so that he doesn't kill any of them. So they take all their stuff. They take they take Benjamin. They take this money, all this, and they come up to Joseph's doorstep. And what does Joseph do? Does he kill him? No. He throws him a big old, massive banquet. All right. He takes them. He tells them to kill the best animals you got. He gets all the people in Egypt. Throws this massive banquet. Keep in mind, they're in the middle of a famine. There's no food anywhere, and he throws a massive banquet for these guys. Can you imagine how confused they were at this point? They probably thought the second they walk on his door, they're all going to be killed because they robbed him. They took his money. There's no telling what they thought. But they get back, and he throws them this banquet. Now, this banquet's really important, okay? He lines up the brothers in order of their age. He sets them all in order of their age. They have this banquet. He talks to them. They still have no idea who he is through this whole story. I'm telling you guys, you couldn't write a story better than this. Like, this is a good story. He has this whole dinner with them, with his brothers, that threw him into a pit, and they never realize it's him. Like, Joseph was pretty good. They never realized who he was. Now, Joseph decides to take it a step further. Okay, at this point, when they're leaving again, he gives them the food. Again, he puts the money back in the bag, the same way he did before. He sends them off, but he gives them one more little test here. He takes his cup, his big old flashy silver cup that he drinks out of, and he puts it in Benjamin's bag. All right? Benjamin, the little one, the one that the father's scared to death to let go. He puts it in his bag and lets them go. Once they're a little bit outside of town, he tells a servant, he says, I want you to go and check their stuff. All right? So imagine this. They're all walking out. They're leaving Egypt, and the servant comes up, right? They've got Simeon, they've got Benjamin, they've got all their money, they've got food, they're just happy. And the servant comes up, and he's like, hey, I need to check your bags. And what does he find? First thing he finds is all the money, again, that Joseph put in the bags. And I'm sure just one by one, the guy's just walking by like, there's some money, and they're just like scared to death. And finally, they get down to Benjamin. And they look in, they find the money, and then they pull out Joseph's own silver cup that he drinks out of. These brothers are scared to death. They have no idea how it happened. They're confused. They don't know anything. We're going to talk about why Joseph does all this. I think there's a really good lesson there for why he goes through all this. But what happens here is they take all of these brothers, obviously, they take them, they bring them back to where Joseph is, and this is the response we have. Okay, look at Genesis 45, verse number 1. I think I have it up here. Yeah, verse number 40, Genesis 45, 1 through 16. We're going to read Joseph's whole response here. I'll let you guys get there for a second. So this is right when they bring him back. This is what happens after this. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, because every man to go out from me. He clears the room. He says, everybody, I want you to get out of the room. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brother. I need to stop for a second. I missed something really important. I want you guys to understand. Right when they get back, before Joseph has his meeting with them, Judah, okay, you guys don't know him yet, but Judah, he's one of the older brothers. He comes up to Joseph, and he tells Joseph, I will take the punishment for Benjamin. That's really important for you guys to understand. I skipped over that in my notes. He comes up and he tells Joseph, he says, whatever you're going to do to Benjamin, do it to me. Because he knows how much it would hurt his father, Jacob, to lose Benjamin. So Judah does this. This is what pushes Joseph to his breaking point. So Joseph clears the room. Verse number 2. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? Right in one sentence, he says, hey guys, by the way, I'm Joseph, and also, is father okay? It's kind of weird how he phrases that. I don't know why. I don't know if he just doesn't care about his brothers that much at all. I don't really know why, but it's funny how he does this. It's not like, haha, I got you guys. Like, now I'm going to throw you in prison the rest of your life. No, it's like, hey guys, by the way, I'm Joseph. How's dad? It's basically what he says. And it says this, and his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. They literally were speechless. They could say nothing. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. I want you guys to picture this, okay? Think about the brothers in this scenario. They have, in their minds, as far as they knew, stolen, well, let's back up even further. They've thrown this guy in a pit, sold him to slavery, okay? They told his father that he had died, they had stolen money from him, in their minds, 2 times, and their little brother stole his favorite silver cup, okay? Now they figure out this is the guy that they threw into a pit a long time ago. Probably a little scared, right? Like, yeah, I would hate to be in their position at this point in time. Let's see here. Where are we at? Verse number 4. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. Focus on this, guys. This is incredible. For God did send me before you to preserve life. How far do I want to read? Let's read a little further here. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So what does he say here? He says, you guys are off the hook. Why? Because God is the one that orchestrated this whole thing. Like, what an incredible amount of understanding for Joseph to have. Notice here, we don't know his emotion, but he shows no anger. He shows no malice. He shows nothing negative to these brothers and all that they did to him. In fact, he doesn't even blame them. He says, this is God's plan. You guys are off the hook. What an incredible example. Do you guys think you could forgive somebody like that? Like, do you really think somebody that did that to you, you could forgive them? Not only that, but not even place blame on them like that. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that. But that's exactly what Joseph does. And we see a reiteration of this a little bit later where he does the same thing. But I want to look at this real quick. Why does Joseph treat them like this? Why does Joseph go through all this? And then we're gonna look at one of the last things Joseph does before he dies. But before we get to that, why does Joseph treat them like this? There's 3 reasons why Joseph goes through all this trouble. Why didn't he just tell them at the beginning? Why didn't he just put him in prison? Why didn't he do any of this? Let's look at some of these. The first one is this. This is one I wish it was, but I don't think it is. He has a sense of humor, and he's just messing around with him. I don't think that's what Joseph is doing, because we see the times when they mention his name or they mention what's going on, he is absolutely distraught. I think this was a very serious thing for Joseph to see his brothers come back. He's not just messing with them. He's not just trying to play games with them. What's the second option? He is angry and he's trying to get back at them. He's trying to put them into as much turmoil and as much hard time. Gosh, I can't speak. Hard times as he can to get back at them for what he did. I don't think this is the case either, because we see Joseph's heart at the end of this for how he thinks toward his brothers. Here's why I think he goes through all this, why he puts them through all these problems of giving their money back and putting the cup in the bag and all this. I think he wanted to see their character. He wanted to see how these brothers, if they had actually changed. Here's why. Notice the event. The reason why Joseph decided to tell his brothers who he was when Judah stood up and he said that he would take the punishment for Benjamin. Does that sound like the same brother that threw Joseph into the pit? No, not at all. Like he was giving him away. He was trying to get rid of him. And this brother stands up and he decides to give his own life for his little brother. Not because he cared about his brother, because he cared about his father and how his father would react. I think that was the tipping point. That's when Joseph said, all right, these guys, they've learned their lesson. And we are able to be in a relationship again. And that's really important. When you look through all this example, you look through all this that Joseph went through, he is testing them over and over again. He gives them a chance with the money. He gives them a chance with Simeon. He gives them a chance by bringing back Benjamin over and over. It's, hey, do this, do this. He's trying to get them to show him that they have changed. And it wasn't until that very last point there where he finally believed it. That's not biblical. That's what I believe. That's what I believe by example here, what happened. So, after this, super paraphrase through like 5 chapters. Basically what happens is at this point, he welcomes the brothers in. He tells them to go back and get his father. And not only his father, but the whole family. He says, go back, get everybody back home and bring him. About 70 people total. Big families back then. It wasn't like mom and dad. It was like mom and dad and their 15 cousins and their 15 cousins. It was a lot. 70 people they tell to bring back to Egypt, and they're going to live there. When they get back, Joseph takes his father and brings his father to the Pharaoh himself. I can just imagine this. I mean, Jacob was a pretty big deal when it came to the Israelites and all that. Nothing compared to Pharaoh. Nothing compared to the Pharaoh of Egypt. There's an argument there that he was the most powerful man on earth. He takes him, and Jacob literally meets in front of Pharaoh himself and pleads his case to Pharaoh, just talks to him, tells him why they're there, all this. Pharaoh gives them the best land in all of Egypt. He gives them the best land. He gives them all this money, all this food, everything they could ever want. He sets them up perfect. This is how much respect he had for Joseph. It had nothing to do with the brothers. He had so much respect for Joseph that he set his whole family up in Egypt in the best houses they can, with food, all these things. Through the rest of the chapters, Joseph has a little bit more troubles with the famine, getting the money back. Handles it really well. I encourage you guys to read through that. It's a really good read there. But after this, I want you guys real quick look at Genesis 50. All right, this is the last thing that we see happen in the life of Joseph. Actually, the last chapter of Genesis as well. Genesis 50, verse number 16. So what's going on here? This is sometime later. And his father, Jacob, has died. Jacob has died many years later, and Jacob has asked that he be buried back in his homeland. So they are taking him, they're walking back, cross over the Jordan, they're going back to bury him, and a messenger comes up and tells Joseph the last thing that his father wanted him to know. It's kind of like if you guys ever see like an epilogue in a movie, like where the movie's over and then there's a little section at the end, this is kind of it. Here's what the guy says. This is incredible. There's no better ending to the story of Joseph. It's like if you're watching a movie, it would be this, conclusion, bam, best ending ever, all right? Look at Genesis 50, verse number 16. It says this, "And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin." He says, Joseph, forgive your brothers, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. The very last thing his father says is to completely forgive your brothers. We don't know their relationship. We don't know what happened there. We know that Joseph didn't place blame on them. We don't know what happened with their interpersonal relationship. But the very last thing he says is to forgive him. And this is what Joseph says to his brothers. He says, And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? Notice the question mark. It says, Am I in the place of God? He is basically saying this. that forgiveness is not mine to give. God's already forgiven him. He says, I'm not in the place of God. I don't have the option to offer that forgiveness. That is God's. Verse 20. But as for you, you thought evil against me, speaking to his brothers. You thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. He says, hey, you meant evil to me, but God made it good. He took the evil situation and he made it good. How did he do that? Well, through this long situation of Joseph being put into the pit, being put into Egypt, being put into prison, into the Pharaoh's house, he saved thousands and thousands of lives. And more importantly, he specifically mentions the brothers. Look at verse number 21. Now therefore fear ye not. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. What Joseph is saying here is, hey, I saved not only Egypt through all the things that God put me through, I saved you guys as well. He saved through what his brothers did to him. It resulted in him saving their lives by allowing them to have the food when the time came. What an incredible lesson there. What an incredible lesson there. And there's so many lessons I could go over. I want you guys to get out of this. The whole thing we've looked at through the whole story of Joseph is with God's plan, okay? You guys cannot try to think that you understand God's plan at the beginning. Joseph would have never in a million years been able to try to understand at the beginning when his brothers threw him in that pit, when he was sitting in prison. He could have never in a million years understood or even thought, projected what could have ended up out of his situation. But see, at the end of it, and again, I've said this multiple times, Joseph had a luxury in his life to see the plan that came to happen. Most people don't. There's few in Scripture. He's one. Job is one. There's few people that see it. But what we see here is with God's plan, you guys can never write off bad situations as the end of your life. You can never write it off as God has forgotten you. God has a plan in your guys' life. And when we look at the example of Joseph, in every step of the way, he continued to follow God. He continued to do what was right. And he literally became one of the most powerful men in all of the world. Saved thousands of people and even fixed the one problem he had with his family. He fixed it and saved them as well. Don't ever write off God. Don't ever write off God's plan. He always has your best interest at heart. He will always make it turn out, as Joseph says, for good.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the message, check out our other podcasts, share us with your friends, and check out our church at gracebaptistcoatesville.org. I hope this was a blessing to you. Thanks again for listening.